Hi and welcome back to my channel. Here before you see my three new orchids, the Belina and the presumably a Violacia hybrid and what might be the Chaos Happy Eagle. The nursery got back to me about their IDs and unfortunately they can't find them in their records anymore. So I'm afraid these are doomed to be no IDs forever. So I need to try and figure out what I would like to call them, what they look like most, and I'll just have to call them whatever I want, I guess, with a bit of a disclaimer. So if you have any idea what they could be, what would be a good match, then please leave it behind in the comments below and I'll have a look and maybe one of you finds a very nice exact match. So I'm making this video today because I'm going away on a 3-week trip and all my plants, all of my orchids, are going to be without any watering for 2 weeks because my boyfriend's coming back 1 week before I am, so he can water a bit when he gets back. Which means that I need to make sure that my plants actually survive for 2 weeks without watering, and this is the height of summer. In the winter this would be no problem, but in the height of summer this can be a bit tricky. So especially for my 3 newest orchids that you see before you, I have a bit of a problem because they're in bloom, they're summer bloomers, which means that I like more water anyway, and they're not in a self-watering setup. Most of my orchids are in a self-watering setup, so for them it's relatively simple, and I'll show you later what I do to ensure that they survive for 3 weeks, not 2 weeks. But for these I can't do that, for these I have to try something else. So in this video I'll show you how I prepare my orchids for my travel, for being alone for 2 weeks, and I hope it will be of use to you when you go traveling at some point. So here you can see what this setup is going to look like a bit. I have all of my orchids here on my coffee table, which is about 1.5 meters away from my window. And I bought this big box, which is about maybe 10 centimeters deep. And some grates I already had that I've put on top of it. And the idea is that I'm going to elongate the wicks on my self-watering pots so that they reach the bottom of this box. And that then they'll be able to use this entire box as a giant reservoir while I'm gone. It will be shared amongst all plants, but it will still be far more than they have in their own little pots usually. When I fill them in their own pots where they are now, they have water for usually about 5 days. So for roots that are used to more or less constantly being wet, that's not a great thing. This is what's going to look like in the end. And my preparation mostly entails stapling microfiber wicks to the existing microfiber wicks to elongate them, and adding microfiber wicks to pots that do not have them yet, but do have absorbent material like sphagnum moss. That's the end result, and I'll show you how to add the wicks to the pots that already have wicks and to the pots that don't have wicks. Alright, so all you really need for this is microfiber cloth. And in this case I have a microfiber mop because it's easier than a standard microfiber cloth like these. Because these you have to cut into strips for yourself, and it's more effort. While the mop is basically already in the format you want. They're long microfiber strips. And then all you do is you take your scissors and you cut off a microfiber strip. There you go. Until you have, a few of them. And then you use a stapler to staple them to the existing wicks. So we've got the plant set up on a little bit of a raised plateau so we can easily access the wick. Then we take one of the microfiber cloth strips that we cut from the mop and we overlap it with the existing wick. Then we take our stapler, and I have to warn you, it doesn't work perfectly in one go. I've had quite a few times that the staples do not properly penetrate. It's empty. So you have to just put quite a few staples in to actually secure it, because a lot of them don't penetrate through both parts of the microfiber. It's quite thick, quite a lot thicker than paper, which is what it's designed for, of course. And this way you just put in a bunch of staples to try and make sure that the wicks hold together. And I always put some on the back as well, just to be sure. Every little bit will help. Especially because you have to consider that even if it's holding now, that one didn't go well. Once it's in the water and absorbing water and wicking the water up, especially once the water level starts to lower over the next few days, the amount of weight this wick needs to carry is much larger wet than when it's dry. So even if it's holding now, if it's not sturdy enough, it might just drop off in a few days when it's wicking up water and the water level lowers. So it is quite important to make sure it's properly attached. There's like probably much better ways to do this. Potentially you could just sew it on, but I don't have a sewing kit. So this is what I'm going with. So you take the other wick. I have 2 wicks in most of my pots just to make sure there's enough water uptake. So I put 1 elongated wick on each of the wicks. Alright, turn it over. I haven't had to do this before. So far all the little reservoirs I've had for my plants have been good enough to survive for 2 weeks. But since this is the first time I'm taking them through the height of summer, and so far they've been really sucking their reservoirs dry quite quickly, I was a bit too nervous to leave them in their normal pots this time around. So that's why you haven't seen me do this before. So that's plant 1 done. That's the example I have for elongating the wicks on a pot that already had wicks. So this here is actually 1 wick, this here is 1 wick, and I've just given each wick a longer part. I don't think there's really a point to elongating these either. It's just a lot of extra effort that I don't really want to go through. So with that done, it can be put on the grate and added to the big reservoir. And the next part is putting a wick on a pot that does not have a wick. Now this pot is filled with pure sphagnum moss. And sphagnum moss is extremely wicking. So I can just use this pot and just introduce a wick at the bottom, and that should be enough. So the way I'm going to do this is that I'm going to have a wooden skewer and a wick, one of the smaller wicks on the mop in this case, because it needs to fit through the holes. And I'm just going to hold it against one of the holes in the bottom of the pot and just kind of push it through with my, just kind of push it through with my wooden skewer, like so. Make sure it's in there tight because you don't want it to slip out when it gets heavy with water. And there you go. You have a wick. Now when it comes to my 3 new Phalaenopsis orchids, it's a little bit more difficult. They are summer bloomers, they like having water, so I cannot just leave them dry for 2 weeks. They won't like that. And on top of that, they're in bloom, which means that they need more resources and more moisture than they usually do. The problem that we have is that I can't just enter a wick into these pots. The reason being that these pots have bark as a medium, and I'm pretty sure it's full bark. There's nothing else other than bark in there. And bark doesn't wick, like, at all. It just doesn't. So I can just put a wick in this, and there'll be that. I have to find some other solution for them. So in the end, what I've decided to do is to simply give them a very good soaking right before I go, so that'll be tomorrow morning, and then leave them sitting in a tray of water. So when I'm talking about a tray of water, I mean something along the lines of this. There we go. Just a plate or a tray or anything that can hold some water, and you soak the medium very thoroughly and you leave it standing in water. Now usually you don't want to do it with Phalaenopsis orchids, but if you're going to be away for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and if they're going to be without care for 2 weeks like mine are, and they're summer bloomers, you might want to do this. I think it's probably the better idea. I've been considering leaving them in some sort of encasing where there will be higher humidity, but I don't really have anything suitable other than a little greenhouse I already have some of my more struggling plants in, and I want to keep them in there. So I'm just going to have to do this and hope that it's enough. And here you see the results. All the plants are on the grating, the wicks are in the box is filled with fertilized water. And I believe that this particular box holds about 30 liters. So that should I really do hope that should hold them for the 2 weeks that they'll be without care. And then over here, I've got a second box, because the other one was getting a little bit too busy. And in it I have a Cymbidium and 2 Oncidiums, including what I think is an Odontoglossum type, potentially suitable. And they have their own reservoir of about 20 liters. And I've done this mostly because, first of all, there was no space in the other one, but also this Cymbidium right now drinks like crazy. And then lastly, I have this little reservoir here, with my catasetums, Catasetinae. This here is a Cloacia Grace Dunn. This is a Signodes Wine Delight. And here we have the Fred Quaquera After Dark. And since they're all really in the middle of their growing season, I definitely couldn't leave them without enough sufficient water and nutrients. So I gave them their own I gave them their own reservoir. There's about 20 liters in there as well. And with higher feed than the rest, so that I can hopefully grow unimpeded. And that's it. That's how I prepare for my 3 weeks away. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's useful to you. And I hope it shows you that orchid care, even a somewhat sizable collection like mine, I have about 35 orchids, and I consider it quite sizable, that you can still travel. You're not chained to your house. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!